Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're kicking off Act 3 of our Cao Cao Let's Talk Lore series with Episode 1, titled The Qingzhou Army Corp. Now, Act 3 here will be the final act of our Cao Cao Let's Talk Lore series, as the scope of this series covers from Cao Cao's birth to the moment that Cao Cao becomes the last prime minister of the Han. Of course, Cao Cao's story goes far beyond that, and we'll eventually come back in other Let's Talk Lore series to cover them. But for the time being, let's continue with where we left off last time, as Cao Cao foolishly and bravely led the failed attack against Dongzhuo at Xinyang, where he was crushed by an army that was 5 times his size. And not only was he crushed, Cao Cao almost died during this battle, as he was struck off his horse by an arrow, and had it not been his cousin Cao Hong, who had risked his own life by giving up his own horse for Cao Cao and escorting an injured Cao Cao off the battlefield, while Wei Zi, who had bankrolled Cao Cao's whole operation in the first place, gave up his life trying to reinforce this desperate situation in order to buy some time for Cao Cao's escape. Now, before we brush over the death of Wei Zi, who in the grand scheme of things is a minor character in history, we have to talk about his importance to Cao Cao, as he was the one who financed Cao Cao's dream of becoming a warlord when Cao Cao's own father had refused. And it was also Wei Zi who had led 3,000 of Zhang Miao's men to come reinforce Cao Cao's 5,000 at Xinyang, only to ultimately give his life. And his sacrifice here, and his overall importance to Cao Cao, can't be understated. And even Cao Cao deeply felt this too, as Wei Zi was given a grand burial in his hometown of Chenliu, and Cao Cao even made sure to come sweep his tomb every time he passed through Chenliu in the future. And Wei Zi's surviving son, Wei Zhen, was also taken in by Cao Cao and raised almost like his own son. And Wei Zhen would grow up to become a key government official under Cao Cao, Cao Pi, Cao Rui, and Cao Fang's regimes, as he proved to become a skilled diplomat as well as a strategist for the army. And he would serve his entire life in the Wei courts, as he would die of old age serving as a Grand Excellency to the dynasty of Wei while holding on multiple marquis titles, and his sons and grandsons would all continue to hold high posts in both the Wei regime and the Qin regime that followed. So in a sense, Wei Zi's sacrifice here at Xinyang for Cao Cao was definitely repaid 1,000-fold for his clan. Now for Cao Cao himself, the situation after the Battle of Xinyang was indeed dire, as he had lost more than half of his force in the battle, and to make matters worse, he needed time to recover from his own injury, and no one in the coalition seems to care about his situation, as they were all starting to show signs of internal strife. So lying in bed injured, Cao Cao turned to Cao Hong once again, as he gave him command of the last 1,000 or so of his men, and asked him to head south on a recruitment mission, as Cao Cao desperately needed to rebuild his own force. And Cao Hong did not disappoint, as he headed south to the Yang province, where his childhood friend Chen Wen was the current prefect. Now, in case you're wondering how Cao clan turns out to have so many friends in high places, just remember that Cao Teng, Cao Cao's own grandfather, and Cao Hong's granduncle, had served as one of the most powerful eunuchs for 30 years during the span of 4 emperors. So naturally, the political connection was vast, and given that both Cao Cao and Cao Hong were the type to hunt, drink, and hang out during their youth rather than stay home to study, they naturally made a lot of friends from other powerful clans. So by the time that Cao Hong had finished his mission down south and left the Yang province, Chen Wen had managed to help Cao Hong recruit over 2,000 experienced spearmen from Lujiang, a place well known for their skilled spearmen, and a few thousand more militias down from Danyang south of the Yangtze River. And by the time that Cao Hong has returned with this new force, Cao Cao had made a full recovery from his injuries, and the coalition had already fully fractured, with Liu Dai killing Qiao Mao to seize control of the Dong Commandery, where he installed Wang Gong as his new administrator there. But by the end of July in 191, not long after Wang Gong took over in the Dong Commandery, the Black Mountain Bandits, led by Yu Du and Bai Rao, fresh from their victories at Ye, led their forces of roving bandits numbering over 100,000 strong in total to enter the Yan province to continue their raids now south of the Yellow River. And of course, if megacities such as Ye could fall to this group, the Dong commandery had no chance, as Wang Gong soon died trying to defend the city. And this is where Cao Cao saw his first opportunity with his new force, as he quickly led his armies to Dong in an effort to repel the bandits and restore order. And after a few skirmishes around Puyang, Bai Rao's forces were beaten back by Cao Cao, as the bandits' main forces have started to retreat back toward north of the Yellow River and back to the Black Mountains due to some fierce counterattack in the Ji province led by the likes of Yuan Shao and Wang Quan. And in response to Cao Cao's success here in the Dong commandery, Yuan Shao, his old friend, used his position as the leader of the coalition forces to name Cao Cao as the new administrator of Dong, even though Yuan Shao really had no mandate to do this, and that the coalition only really existed in name at this point as it has largely fallen apart already. But regardless, this simple favor from an old friend helped Cao Cao gain some legitimacy as he made Dong his base of operation. But the effects of the bandit raids would continue to reverberate throughout this region, as by the next year, the upheaval caused by these Black Mountain bandit raids resulted in massive amounts of displaced population in the Yan and the neighboring Qing provinces, as many of the poor farmers who are now displaced from their lands turn back to the Yellow Turbans as a way of support, and a resurgency of Yellow Turban activities soon engulfed the Qing province, with followers numbering over 1 million strong. And this wave of Yellow Turban rebellion soon overran many of the commanderies in the Qing province that included the likes of Kongrong's Beihai commandery, and soon started to encroach on neighboring Yan province, and Liu Dai, who is still the prefect of Yan province, was soon under attack. Now this time, Bao Xin, who was the chancellor of Jibei, advised Liu Dai to garrison within the city and wait out the rebels, as this group of rebels had no food and relied on raiding, while they had strong walls to outlast them. However, Liu Dai, who had strong ambitions for himself, refused to sit on his hands as the rebels ravaged his land and demanded the army ride out to face these peasants. Now we say that Liu Dai had big ambitions here because during the year from when he had first killed Qiao Mao, he had positioned himself as a real force with political marriages for his kids with both Yuan Shao and Gong Sun-zan's families. And even though this setup soon proved to be problematic, as Gong Sun-zan and Yuan Shao would go to war with each other, and to make matters worse, Gong Sun-zan, who had the upper hand in the early periods of this war between Gong Sun-zan and Yuan Shao, had given an ultimatum to Liu Dai to ask him to expel Yuan Shao's family members who had been staying with him while Yuan Shao was busy expanding the north, or else Gong Sun-zan will come to kill Liu Dai after he wipes out Yuan Shao. So given this ultimatum, he consulted with some of his strategists, including Cheng Yu, who was a very well-known strategist in the region, and he came to the final conclusion that he was going to stick with Yuan Shao and not listen to Gong Sun-zan, as Cheng Yu predicted that Gong Sun-zan in the long run will be no match for Yuan Shao, which would prove to be true. But Liu Dai would not live to see that day, as his decision to ride out and face the Yellow Turban rebels head-on would result in his death on the battlefield, as these rebels, whose morale was high off of defeating the Qing province troops, overran Liu Dai's forces on the field. And Bao Xin, seeing that the prefect had died, leaving no one in charge, invited Cao Cao, who was someone he was familiar with as they had worked together during the coalition days, and as someone who he trusted, to come to aid the Yan province in this dire time and assume the role of prefect now that Liu Dai's death had left it an empty position. And Cao Cao eagerly took his chance here as he launched his army out at the Yellow Turbans, and with the help of Bao Xin, they were able to fight a series of battles against these Yellow Turban rebels, where both sides paid a heavy price. Now, on Cao Cao's side, Bao Xin would actually die in one of these battles, while also trying to save Cao Cao's life. And on the Yellow Turban side, their advance were halted, they had no source of supplies, and by the winter of 192, they had ran out of supplies. So the two sides, who are both wounded, decide to come together for a final parley. As Cao Cao finally also came to the realization that these rebels are simply poor farmers who are trying to get back their land and a source of food. So the final result of this peace negotiation in December of 192 was that Cao Cao was able to convince the entirety of the Yellow Turban Rebellion from the Qing province, numbering close to 1 million in population, including women, children, as well as fighting men, to surrender to Cao Cao. And in return, Cao Cao would redistribute the lands in the Yan province back to them. And from this 1 million group of Yellow Turban rebels, about 300,000 were picked out to form the Qingzhou Army Corp. Now, this figure is taken directly from 三国志, or the Records of the Three Kingdoms, and it's clear that these 300,000 were not all combatants, but that they included the families of able combatants as well. And this entire group, the 300,000 strong, became Cao Cao's first professional army. And from this number, the young and able were trained to fight and form the fighting corps. And their families, including their wives, elderly, children, were given land to farm and provide for themselves and for the army corps. So this is the beginning of the Tuntian system. And from the fighting men, if they become injured or they become too old, they will retire back to these farms and their sons would take their place, and the cycle would continue. So the actual number of combat troops from the Qingzhou Army Corps is definitely debatable, but it should be less than 50,000 men. But as you can see, this is a huge jump in power for Cao Cao. And this event in the winter of 192, where Cao Cao was able to not only negotiate peace, but also absorb part of the Yellow Turban rebels, really made Cao Cao a strong player from this point on, as he had a force now numbering at least 50,000 strong, and he had a whole province under his control, as he is the one to save the Yan province, so now he has a whole province and a strong army, and this group of professional soldiers, the Qingzhou Army Corps, will become the core of Cao Cao's army for the next 28 years, until Cao Cao's death in 220, where they actually collectively retired and decided to return to the farms, causing quite a stir for Cao Pi, who had just taken over. Now, this system of having professional soldiers and their families farm on these Tuntian farm would eventually evolve under Cao Cao's reign, as there was a lot of unclaimed farmland that needed to be redistributed during these periods of war. So this became the basis for Cao Cao's in-game unique buildings in Total War III Kingdom as well, as he has not only farm garrisons for the farmland counties, but he also has a special conscription building that focuses on Tuntian. So you can see how these farm garrisons in-game not only provide high replenishment, but also food for your armies as well. But returning to our story here, now with some land under his name and a full fighting force, Cao Cao is ready to take on the world, and it happens that the world is colliding with him, as his sudden rise in the Yan province and his closeness with Yuan Shao, who is starting to consolidate power in the north, finally made Cao Cao a key target in the eyes of Yuan Shu, who is now engaged in this proxy war against his brother Yuan Shao. So come back next time as the Qingzhou Army Corps will face their first test on the battlefield. So with that, we're going to end our episode. Hopefully you all enjoyed this one, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!